So here we are, and I'm going to be reading from the Boundaries book in the chapter Boundaries and Your Children, which if you've been following some of the other videos, you know that the Boundaries parenting chapter has had some rich nuggets for everyday life in very practical ways. So I'd encourage you to pick up the book and read it with us. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and just get straight to it. Page 186 is the page that I'm on in the Boundaries book. I highly recommend you get yourself a copy. And it's called Seasonal Boundaries, Age-Appropriate Limits and Training. And we'll be going through birth to 5 months, 5 to 10 months, 10 to 18 months, and 18 months to 36 months or 3 years. And then I'll make a different video for the next age groups. All right, here we go. If this was the first Whoops. If this was the first chapter you turned to when you glanced over the table of contents, chances are you're a parent. Chances are also that you may be experiencing boundary difficulties with your children. Perhaps you're reading this simply in an effort to prevent problems. But more likely, you're in some pain from which you need relief. Your newborn won't stop shrieking, or your toddler runs the household, or your elementary school student has behavioral problems at school, or your junior high kid smarts off, or your high schooler is drinking. All of these issues indicate possible boundary problems. And this section provides an outline on the age-appropriate boundary tasks your children should be learning. See, this chapter is worth buying the book for. As parents, we need to take into consideration our children's developmental needs and abilities to avoid asking them to do something they can't do, or to avoid asking too little of them. Below are the basic tasks for the different stages of childhood. For more detailed information on birth to age 3, refer to chapter 4 on how boundaries are developed in childhood. Okay, birth to 5 months. At this stage, the newborn needs to establish an attachment with mother, dad, or the primary caregiver. A sense of belonging, of being safe and welcome are the tasks the child needs to accomplish. Oh, setting limits is not as much an issue here as providing security for the infant. The only real boundary here is the soothing presence of the primary caregiver, who is usually the mother. She protects the infant. Mom's job is to help her newborn contain intense, frightening, and conflicting feelings. Left by themselves, infants are terrorized by their aloneness and lack of internal structure. Oh, that's why it's so important, moms, that we take care of ourselves, that we know how we are feeling first and foremost, and make sure that we have a plan to get our own personal needs met. If you would like help with that, please let me know. That's something I specialize in. Okay, for centuries, mothers, including Mary, Jesus' mother, have swaddled their babies or wrapped clothes tightly around them. While swaddling keeps the baby's body heat regulated, the tight wrappings also help the infant feel safe, a sort of external boundary. The baby knows where he or she begins and ends. When newborns are undressed, they often panic about the loss of structure around them. Some well-meaning Christian teachers call for infant training theories that schedule the feeding and holding of infants. These techniques try to teach an infant not to cry or demand comfort because the child is in control instead of the parent, or because that demand is evidence of the child's selfish, sinful nature. These theories can be horribly destructive when not understood biblically or developmentally. The screaming 4-month-old child is trying to find out whether the world is a reasonably safe place or not. She is in a state of deep terror and isolation. She hasn't learned to feel comfort when no one is around. To put her on the parent's schedule instead of her own for holding and feeding is to condemn the innocent, as Jesus said in Matthew 12:7. These teachers say their programs are biblical because they work. Quote, "When I stopped picking her up from the crib at night, my 4-month-old stopped crying," they'll say. That may be true, but another explanation for the cessation of crying is infant depression, a condition in which the child gives up hope and withdraws. Hope deferred makes the heart sick, says Proverbs 13:12. Teaching delay of gratification shouldn't begin until after the first year of life, when a foundation of safety has been established between the baby and the mother. Just as grace always precedes truth, attachment must come before separation. I wish I had that. I wish I had known this better. Don't you? Oh, so good. 5 to 10 months old. As we learn in chapter 4, children in the last half of the first year of life are in the hatching phase. They are learning that mother and I aren't the same. There's a scary, fascinating world out there that babies literally crawl toward. Though they have tremendous dependency needs, infants are beginning to move out of their oneness with their mom. To help their children develop good boundaries during this stage, parents need to encourage attempts at separateness while still being the anchors the child clings to. Allow your child to be fascinated with people and objects other than you. Make your home a safe place for your baby to explore. Helping your children hatch, however, doesn't mean neglecting the deep attachment necessary for their internal foundation, their rootedness and groundedness. This is still an infant's primary work. You need to carefully tend to your child's needs for bonding and emotional safety while at the same time allowing the child to look outward beyond you. Many mothers find this transition from their child's love affair with them to the big, wide world difficult. The loss of such a deep intimacy is great, especially after the time spent in pregnancy and childbirth. The responsible mother, however, will strive to get her own closeness needs met by the other adults in her life. She will encourage the hatching of her baby, knowing she is preparing him or her to be equipped to leave and cleave. At this point, some infants don't yet have the ability to understand and respond appropriately to the word no. Keeping them out of danger by picking them up and removing them from unsafe places is the best route. Okay, ages 10 to 18 months. At this practicing stage, your baby begins not only talking but also walking, and the possibilities stretch out before her. The world is this child's oyster, and she spends a lot of time finding ways to open it up and play with it. Now she has the emotional and cognitive ability to understand and respond to the word no. Boundaries, both having and hearing limits, become increasingly important during this stage. Allowing the no muscle to begin developing is crucial at this age. No is your child's way of finding out whether taking responsibility for her life has good results or whether no causes someone to withdraw. As parents, learn to rejoice in your baby's no. At the same time, you have the delicate task of helping your child see that she is not the center of the universe. There are limits in life. There are consequences for scribbling on doors and screaming in church. Yet, you need to do this without quenching the sense of excitement and interest in the world that she's been developing. 18 to 36 months. The child is now learning the important task of taking responsibility for a separate, yet connected, soul. The practicing child gives way to the more sober child who is realizing that life has limits, but that being separate does not mean that we can't be attached. In this phase, the following abilities are goals. Number 1, the ability to be emotionally attached to others without giving up a sense of self and one's freedom to be apart. That is so good. Number 2, the ability to say appropriate no's to others without fear of loss of love. And number 3, the ability to take appropriate no's from others without withdrawing emotionally. At 18 to 36 months, the child needs to learn to be autonomous. She wants to be free of parental rule, but this desire is conflicted by her deep dependence on her parents. The wise parent will help her gain a sense of individualism and accept her loss of omnipotence, but without losing attachment. To teach a child boundaries at this stage, you need to respect her no whenever appropriate, yet maintain your own firm no. It's easy for you to try to win all the skirmishes, but there are simply too many. You will end up losing the war because you've lost the big picture, the attachment. Don't waste your energy trying to control a random whirlwind. Pick your battles carefully and choose the important ones to win. Wise parents will rejoice in children's fun times, but will consistently and uniformly keep solid limits with the practicing child. At this age, children can learn the rules of the house as well as the consequences for breaking them. One workable process of discipline is listed below. Number 1, first infraction. Tell the child not to color on the bedsheet. Try to help the child meet her need in another way, using a coloring book or a pad of plain paper to color on instead of a bedsheet, for example. Okay, second infraction. Again, tell the child no and state the consequence. She will need to take a time out for 1 minute or lose the crayons for the rest of the day. The third infraction, administer the consequences, explaining why, then give the child a few minutes to be angry and separate from parents. Infraction number 4, comfort and reconnection. Oh, this is after the third infraction. So the third infraction, again, administer the consequences, explaining why, then give the child a few minutes to be angry and separate from parents. Okay. Number 4, comfort and reconnection. Hold and comfort the child, helping her reattach with you. This helps her differentiate between consequences and a loss of love. Painful consequences should never include a loss of connection. Okay, so honestly, I don't know anybody who does this really, really well. And I bet you don't either, which is why we all need this. Because if we're not disciplining well, we're disciplining poorly, and we're giving our kids mixed signals about what's appropriate, what's not, what attachment looks like, what attachment doesn't look like, and that, like, long-term consequences, right? The ripple effect of that is like divorce, or not marrying at all, because why would you even attach to somebody when you could just get what you want from them and move on? So we don't want that. That's not good for anybody in the long run. So the first infraction, again, is to tell the child not to color on the bedsheet and give them another option. Second infraction, tell the child no and state the consequence, that she will need to take a time out for 1 minute or lose the crayons for the rest of the day if she does it again. I think I tend to jump to that one. Maybe it's because I have teenagers now. But I'm like, this is what you did. If you do that again, this is what's going to happen. That's kind of how I do that now. But when they were younger, I could see why you definitely need a more gentle hand. So this is for 18 months to 36 months. Okay, third infraction, administer the consequences, explaining why. Then give the child a few minutes to be angry and separate from the parents. That is so important. I had a child with a lot of passion, not unlike myself. And I think all he really needed was a look and a warning and an explanation from me, and not for me to just like respond with a consequence. And if I had it to do over again, that's what I wish I had done. I was so worried about being a good mom and teaching my children to behave that I didn't do these steps. I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't. And now I see how important they are, and I'm trying to, as I've said many times, this is part of my lifelong repentance, to love people in a way that is actually loving as God defines it and not just as I define it, because I'm not in charge. All right, so the third infraction is when you administer the consequences, explaining why, and give a few minutes to be angry and separate for the child away from the parents. Okay, and then the fourth step is comfort and reconnection, which I love. I love that. I love that there's a coming together again, because this reminds me of the gospel, that it's not like when we see what we've done wrong before the Lord, it's not like the Lord is always with a billboard saying, this is what you did wrong, this is how you failed, this is what you screwed up. And that's not how Jesus works. When you actually come to Christ and you say, I acknowledge that what I did was wrong and I need forgiveness, he's like, we are done now with that. You are cleaned from that. So if that guilt keeps coming up, that's not from God. And we get to choose to believe what God says about us, which is that we are cloaked in righteousness. And I love that we are actually practicing that in our parenting with this fourth step, which is comfort and reconnection. So it says, hold and comfort the child, helping her reattach to you. This helps her differentiate between consequences and a loss of love. Painful consequences should never include a loss of connection. And that is where I am going to pause for this section of boundaries and your infant to 36-month-old. If you have any questions, I would love to hear them. And I'm going to think about if I'm going to go a little bit further with this chapter or not. There's just so much here that I feel like less is more. So thank you for watching. Have a great night. Bye-bye.